Hello, welcome one and welcome all to the illustrious and famous Branch Hat Circuit for our season finale of the Simufur Am Championship. Today we come to you from an amazing and historic track known for hosting the F1 circus from 1964 to 74 before it went on a sabbatical, returning for 76 all the way to 1986, a staple in the British GT and Formula calendar, junior series and professional racing alike. My name is Plasma, joined here by Josiah and Wusky, and how are you looking forward to this fine and very warm day at Branch Hat Circuit?
Yeah, it is quite warm out there. We are at the storied Brands Hatch Circuit, approximately 2.4 miles long, 3.9 kilometers. Very technical and very tight circuit. Very much looking forward to seeing the racing here today.
Absolutely, and just like Zandvoort last week, we saw the chaos that came from the drivers having to get frustrated behind one another, but also the trains that would form up and the strategy that would play. Certainly something I'd be expecting in this race, coming into another very tight track, closing out the championship with two of the hardest to overtake tracks on the calendar that ACC even has to offer. It's certainly going to be one that you don't want to miss as we are falling in. Chloe just coming in from a hot lap. We're finishing up the practice session as it is going to be led by our now official series champion, Denak, followed by the RK9 of Czar, and then Chloe, both a second back. Denak really asserting his dominance on this championship even after the season has finished for him, and he has gotten everything he could want, but pedal has not come off of the floor as he's trying to come home with, I believe, it will be his fourth win of the season if he can make that happen today. Certainly certainly something to be proud of after this season that Denak has had previously.
Yeah, from what I've seen, a pretty dominant season overall, especially to clinch it early on in the or relatively early on in the season. But definitely very impressive.
Yeah, without a doubt, and just showing the capability that Denak has in that Ferrari that he switched to this season. Previously being known for being a driver that would have taken out the Jag. This season, him and his teammate Randomie in Tig Gang Racing both deciding to kick it off with the Ferraris instead of running one of the older cars, and boy, have they shown their hand. You see Denak is actually going to be the first on track, first in the standings, and first to run, as he is going to take that Ferrari out for its warm-up lap. And Brands Hatch, very tight, very technical track. Many people hailing this as a true driver's track for the fact that every corner exit covered by plenty of grass, any mistake being very harshly punished, and not going to be many corner cut warnings or many track limit penalties that we're going to see, but rather pure racing that these drivers can push to the absolute limit of what's physically given to them.
Yeah, we are going to see any mistake is immediately going to be problematic for the drivers involved, as there is nowhere to go once you run off that asphalt racing surface.
Absolutely, and Denak just proving where those limits are, even on the warm-up lap, putting the tires all the ways out to the edge of the circuit, leaving taking no time to try to get up to speed, as obviously they are already extremely comfortable with the racing surface that they are planted on. But we're going to jump on board with them for a lap coming through the final corner here. We're going to be seeing him fly right out of Clark Curve and straight onto the Brabham Straight as we head straight to the world famous Paddock Hill corner, one of the hardest corners in racing. You tuck straight up to the inside, a little bit too much curve, but then actually able to keep it clean. And you dive hard into the uphill braking zone of Druids. Keep it tight and focus on getting that power down. Don't run too wide, able to keep it in as you dip and tuck the nose down into Graham Hill Bend. Run wide, taking plenty of exit curve. Keep that momentum up. And then you set yourself up for the long, painful corner of Surtees, just trying to find an apex and find what you can get on power, and well put together by the Ferrari. And now for the longest run of the straight, we're going to see many drivers just trying to take advantage of whatever slipstream they can get as we throw it into Hawthorne, one of the highest speed corners on the circuit. we tuck it in, just trying to use that camber. The tires screaming for help as you then have to throw it into the second right of Westfield and then down into the dip as you get set up to get ready for Dingledale and Sheen's curve. Throwing it over the curb as much as you can, fight that understeer as you then tip it down into Sterling's, tuck it into the apex, trying to use that camber and use that exit curb. And one final corner of Clark curb, just trying to set it up. Don't run too wide, but you need to be on that power nice and early. And the benchmark's gonna be set with a very strong lap from Denak at a 1:24.6. That is the benchmark to beat for the rest of our drivers. And we see now the rest of the grid starting to fall through. Eag as well as I'm not too sure who the other one is, but Geek now setting their first flying lap as you see a couple of our other drivers start their laps as well.
Yes, some very good laps, very good driving coming ahead, especially from the top half of the field for sure. These drivers being very careful to push the limits, but not too much, as it will be costly on this track.
Absolutely, and only 20 minutes to qualify. The first 5 minutes of that for most of these drivers are going to be spent just trying to get their car up to speed, just trying to get the temperature in those tires and try to get them rolling. As we see the Jag in its home territory going into P2, just throwing it in. That Jag with its very archaic traction control, certainly going to be taking a skillful hand to try to pilot that around the circuit. Many traction zones where the rear end of that car is not going to be too happy. The Slowbirds seem to carry some decent pace relative to the rest of the grid.
Yeah, lots of locations where you have to barely just kind of ease into the power as you get around the corner and find that apex. Getting a little too greedy with it will end up with the car sideways and costing you a lot of time coming around that corner.
Absolutely, and we're seeing time gained massively by some of our drivers. Czar, as we head onto the back straight, already up by 1 second on their time. They tip it into Hawthorne's. Looks like maybe getting a little bit of slipstream from, I believe, Firebrand in front of them. But keeping committed is that Ferrari's getting thrown around by the curbs. We talked about this being a driver's track. The track limits are what your car can handle. And it looks like that Ferrari may be a little bit more on edge than the Aston, but this Aston able to really bring the pace out of the asphalt right now.
Yes, and it's going to be a common theme throughout this qualifying session of faster cars catching up to slower cars and those and them working it out. It's going to be interesting to see what lap times people can accrue out of the conditions we have out there. Very hot out there. Track temperature very hot. Tires will be very greasy very quickly on this circuit. I'd imagine you're probably going to see some of your better laps maybe a little bit earlier on than we expect.
Quite possibly. You might be dealing with a little bit of poor tires overheating, possibly causing issues. And we see Chloe going a little bit wide. Most importantly to note, the Mercedes of the Olympus Esports and the second to gang racing Ferrari setting identical times at 1:25.4. Now both 1.513 seconds off of the lead. Denak again continuing to assert their authority on this grid, but randomly trying to look and assert their authority into P2, already up by 2/10 as we go through the first two sectors. They now tip it down through the technical downhill section using all the track randomly with the pink mirrors, easy to identify, just trying to hang it together, looking like they're a little bit more compliant through Dingledale as we turn into Sterling's and the power squeezing on a very good exit from randomly, looking to possibly even challenge Denak's time as we tip it through the final corner. What is it gonna be? Looks like a decent exit, maybe leaving a little bit of time on track, not coming all the ways out. And is it gonna be an improvement? Yes, it is, up to a 1:24.5. Still 0.6 off of Denak, but a serious improvement nonetheless.
Yeah, very solid lap time there. We are seeing drivers absolutely push it to the limits on this track. Trying to just get up there, as track position is very important here, as it is pretty difficult to pass when all the cars are on track at the same time. We will see lots of frustration probably come out of some of these drivers as they end up getting stuck behind their fellow racers.
Absolutely, and we also have seen too throughout the season, the Ferrari tends to be the car that takes a little bit longer to fire up its tires, but yet coming into Brands Hatch here, it has stamped its authority with P1 and 2 immediately on the cards. If the rest of the cars, typically the Mercedes and the Astons, firing up their tires a little bit faster, actually struggling to get the pace into the car right away.
Yes, as we see Geek come down into Paddock Hill Bandit, he's off. He's off. He's stopped it into the gravel. Fortunately, no damage done to that Aston Martin as he is reset to the pits. And we catch back up with Random E coming back through Clearways and down into Clark Curve. They've got that car very under control, it seems.
Quite under control indeed, and this could be another improvement as the sector state. They might be running well, and yes, they are. Now only 1 and a bit tenths off of Denak as they start throwing it through Paddock Hill, possibly sending it all as they could down the straight and going up to a 1 minute 24.077. Quite a strong lap as the Ferraris maybe improving as well. Of Firebrand Page maybe just proving their authority is yes, they do improve to a 126.7, stepping up into that P11 position. Another driver on for their manufacturer's home race, the McLaren, I believe one of 4 McLarens in this race of Pablo, on a big improvement as they enter the latter part of the first half of qualifying here. Many of these drivers also split qualifying decisions. Many drivers seeming to go in the pits already. Other drivers possibly staying out for the full 20 minutes. With your experience in ACC and kind of how these tires work, what do you think the best option is for this Brands Hatch circuit?
Well, it's a very greasy track, as you see a little bit of an off there. We come back up to the Aston Martin here. But yes, tires, with it being as hot as it is going to be a very crucial choice of when you want to qualify. Now, the track will actually grip up a little bit as the session goes on, I believe. But the heat definitely going to be wearing those tires quickly and definitely going to make it trickier to handle this car as they get hotter and hotter throughout the stint.
We see possibly a big off coming in for, I believe this is JPEG, coming through Hawthorne's corner. Is there a little bit of contact here? No, the car's just refusing to comply. Big off coming out.
Yeah,
maybe just minor contact. Yeah, just the rear end maybe pulling the front along with it. That Porsche just refusing to work. We saw the orange Mercedes in the rear view mirror actually still on an improvement up through the first 2 sectors is Snowy with that flying Hellfish car. And is it going to be enough for an improvement? Yes, it's going to be a jump up into P7 for Snowy. Able to get another chunk of time out of that Mercedes-Benz. We see Firebrand improving massively coming through that first sector. Maybe they're going to be able to throw it in as we're going to jump on board with them. We run through Surtees, the drive up the hill, a little bit of rear slippage, but able to get a decent enough exit. We pull through, we come into the GP loop of this track for the Formula One cars. Aim is for throwing it around as we see also the many junior series all the ways from British Formula 4 up to previously Formula 2 until they moved into the larger Grade 1 European tracks. But Firebrand on for an extremely strong lap here. So able to keep tucking in each apex. I think the Ferrari, honestly, one of the cars to beat coming into this race.
Yeah, absolutely. That mid-engine layout is going to be very helpful around these long sweeping corners as the front engine cars will definitely be losing a little bit of grip and heating up their front tires a lot more. They will have to be a lot more cautious with their tire conservation.
Absolutely, and it looks like it will be an improvement for Firebrand. Going a little bit off track after the fact, possibly just resetting the car, just trying to get another run in, but big improvement going on right now for Chloe, already up 1 second on their lap and continuing to just stretch the legs of that German 6.3 liter V8 as they're just trying to throw in a screamer. All it's going to be is one more corner to go and this lap is sealed. Now you take the inside for the shortest run to the line, and what an improvement are we going to see? It's going to be over a second, down to a 1 minute 24.3, and a massive jump up for Chloe with that Olympus Esports Mercedes-Benz, just trying to take that fight to Randomy and Dedak, who've just Going to be the class of the field so far through this qualifying.
Yeah, very impressive run from the driver of the Mercedes-Benz. As I said, they will be a little more difficult to handle around this track. So it is, once again, very impressive to see that car really getting up there.
Absolutely, and another driver that we actually haven't seen this championship until this final race, going to be Lulu, who is one of our resident iRacing drivers, stepping over into ACC here, already putting in a time good enough for P4 with a 1:25.2. Also worth noting there, one of our few, if not, I think, the driver with a controller in this field, at least the only one making it known in the name, as they call themselves, the Pad Sweat, rolling through the field. But even after just setting an improvement, they've already set a faster first sector coming through here, and they could be seeing a jump up challenge for that top 4 position, or those top 3 positions, if they're able to get this Aston Martin a little bit more under them. But now we're stepping into kind of this last third of qualifying. Many of these drivers hitting that do or die moment, that it's going to be now or never. Set out either your final qualifying run or get those tires back into a window where they're going to work better for you.
Yeah, absolutely. As we see them coming down into Dingledale, they are going to make the run up to Sheen Curve. Let's hope this is an improvement for them. See if they can get a top 3 qualifying run out of this, as we are ticking down the seconds and the minutes in qualifying. We are down to just over 6 minutes left, so those drivers are going to be getting out there and once again trying to push for that fastest lap at the end of the session.
Certainly, and is it going to be an improvement for independent driver? No, I don't believe it was. But another driver, once again, first 2 sectors already improving by over 4.5 tenths of a second. Gonna be Snowy just trying to throw that Mercedes-Benz, tucking it in. Mercedes trying to make a statement for them possibly being one of the stronger cars on the grid. As what is this time gonna be? Is the 5:55 throws the time over, good enough for P5 with a 1:25.3. Snowy must be elated with that lap. A very strong lap for the front engine machine. A track that seems to be absolutely dominated right now by the Ferraris and the mid-engine car. But Zara now trying to make a statement as they're getting pushed by Chloe to get another lap. And is it going to be a big enough improvement? No, it is not, but it is an improvement regardless, as they're going to be throwing in a 1:25.5, but still over 2 tenths of a second, or just about 2 tenths of a second, the next car in line. I see Rosario returning to the pits. I do think you're right that many of these drivers are now returning to the pits and maybe only doing 2-lap stints before these tires start to overheat and lose that grip.
Yeah, they will very quickly. It is very important to get those tires up to temp in 1 lap and then get your hot lap in. That's probably what's about to happen with a lot of these drivers that have returned to pits or are returning to pits. They will probably get just enough time to run those 2 laps, and hopefully that last lap being their best one of the session.
Absolutely. T. Denak running a little bit wide, but one of our only drivers on a flying lap. Jump on board now with Hubble, one of our drivers a little bit further down the grid. One of the drivers that we've talked about maybe running for the most improved drivers, that they've really started to get to grips with ACC and understand a little bit better and start fighting with that mid-pack a little bit more. They're taking in the BMW showing a little bit of non-compliance, but does seem to be a track that maybe this car is struggling at, as we have 3 of our BMWs struggling down at the lower part of the grid. Certainly a car that doesn't like the long corners, that very heavy front end, and not exactly great traction. Possibly one of the weaker tracks for this German machine. Just trying to get around, and Hubble just taking just enough curve to get the car rotated, tucking it in. Ooh, maybe a little bit wide. That might be an aborted lap for Hubble, but driver already on a flyer. Also in the 007 James Bond livery, another one of the home races. And we see actually the majority of these grid made up by British manufacturers. Home race, many of these drivers are likely wanting to improve or assert their dominance in this race more than the rest.
Yes, absolutely. Those British manufacturers looking for a win on their home territory. As you see, Gig, it's a little bit wide coming off of that corner, but coming up to some looks like slower traffic moving over accordingly. Coming up the hill now, keeping it tight on the inside of that corner, looking very competent, looking very controlled in that Aston Martin. Love the 007 livery.
Yeah, the 007 beam livery as we look at the big chippy on the hood of that Aston Martin. Just trying to swing it around. Ooh, we see a car off track. I believe that was ZZ that was just trying to recover the Porsche. Also, another one of the cars that seemed struggling a little bit coming in here. Ooh, just a little bit too much going onto the outside, and a big hit that's certainly going to be doing quite a bit of damage to the front nose cone of that car. I'd imagine probably a return to pits, but no, coming back out actually to go try to set another hot lap.
Must not have been too much of a hit. Looked like a slight overcorrection after missing the apex. Happens to the best of us. It's a very difficult corner at that speed. But yes, good to see them continuing on. Hopefully not too much damage to the front of that Porsche.
Yeah, hopefully not, as we see another driver improving. Star is actually improved by about 2/10 to take away that P5 position from Snowy. Just over 700ths of a second ahead of the Mercedes-Benz driver. Looks like we have after our Ferrari dominance, Mercedes, Aston, Mercedes, Aston. So it looks like we're going to see the battle between the two V8 branded machines, just trying to fill out that final podium position. This qualifying certainly looking like we're setting us up for quite a good race. Tight gaps in the top 7 positions.
Yeah, as drivers coming up to their final qualifying lap, these guys will be have one more lap after this, and there will be a couple more drivers behind them that I believe will get to finish their lap as well. So they're going to be pushing as hard as possible. As you can see, they're going just a little bit wide over that curve right there. Czar easily recovering that, getting back across this curve right here. But yes, drivers absolutely pushing it to the absolute limit coming down to the end of this session. Exciting stuff.
As we tick down, the final couple of seconds as we come across down into the final corner, as we see the bluey McLaren leading Czar, just giving a little bit of slipstream. But is it going to be enough of an improvement for Czar? No, not an improvement at all, actually, as we jump on board. Another driver improving. JPEG looking for an improvement through the first 2 sectors. Is it going to stick through the final sector? Across the line? No, not an improvement from the number 12 Porsche. Just losing the time through that final sector. We have a couple other drivers down the grid looking to improve, but qualifying is going to be over the 5:12 and just barely getting across the line to get that final qualifying position. So all drivers behind this 5:12 are going to be missing out on qualifying, or on that last lap of qualifying. Grid led by Neo here in the 310 BMW, just trying to get their final laps, and all drivers looking like they might have some kind of improvement coming here. The yellow flags dotting the map as drivers invalidate return to the pits. It looks like a possible improvement. Neo's sector's not looking too good, but a very big improvement coming in right now from JPEG. Just trying to sneak in up 5/10 through the first 2 sectors, just trying to finish it out. And additionally, looks like we're about breaking even on Czar as they run down the main straight here. Is it going to be an improvement? Yes, and it's going to be an identical time to Lulu with a 125.255.
Absolutely incredible.
JPEG just trying to sneak in one final improvement. That improving through the first 2 sectors. Is it going to be an improvement? Yes, but not enough. 500ths back from Hubble for the number 12 Porsche. And oh my, that's going to be a very, very tight grid for that top group. And especially the story of qualifying for me is Lulu and Czar with identical times, identical cars, but completely alternate input methods. One on controller, one on wheel.
It's very impressive. Seeing these drivers that are able to compete with the pad is always so impressive to me, as they are, working with the joystick, and it's not as, some would say it's not as precise, and some would also say that that's also just a matter of choice. But either way, still very impressive to see this, and also keep in mind most likely two different setups as well. Two entirely different drivers, two different setups, and two different input methods, and they end up in the same exact lap time. Very, very cool.
And as you can see, the sector's very, very different actually, as it looks like Lulu was stronger through the middle sector, but then Zar gaining back all that time in that final sector. So very, very different ways that those drivers got that lap time out, and yet they were still able to manage to get near identical lap times down to the thousandths of a second. Can't stress how small of a gap that is. If you're driving at 100 miles an hour, that is less than a millimeter of space pretty much. It's an you almost can't visualize the difference in the gap that is. Those drivers very, very close. Certainly going to make her a very exciting race by the time that we get things started here. But certainly want to be looking forward to. If you had to try to put a driver to watch this race, whether it be up the grid or down the grid, who would you want to keep your eye on for this race?
Well, I would definitely like to see, as I am a lifelong Mercedes driver, just about every racing game I've played, I would definitely like to see the Mercedes do well, and it would certainly be very impressive to see on this track, as it is a very front-limited track in terms of grip.
Yeah, it's going to be a very tight race for many of these drivers, not just on the grid, or not just on lap times, but also the track. We're going to see many of these drivers getting ready. See many of the cars up on their jacks, just trying to get their setups finalized, get that pit strategy set and ready to go, just as a run over for our pits. So we have a 60-minute race ahead of us. Pit window will open 20 minutes into the race, and for that pit window, it will be open for another 20 minutes. You will have to do a mandatory tire stop and also fuel, at least 1 liter of fuel and tires. So many of these drivers are likely going to be short fueling and filling up about 50-60 liters, about half a race distance, maybe a little bit more at that pit window, just trying to get to the end, but enough fuel that they aren't extending their pit stop at all. As we see the majority of these cars starting to set themselves down, we already see Denak ready and confident to go. They must have plenty of experience in their race simulation, just trying to get things rolling.
Yeah, all eyes are going to be on those Ferraris up front as well, being teammate cars. It will be very interesting to see what kind of dynamic goes on at the front of the field, being such a tight racing track.
Absolutely, and also several of the cars down the grid, as we see actually a very colorful grid. Probably the first time that we can recognize that for this season, as all the drivers are so tightly compact. Not many of the colors repeating, as we see many times in real life motorsports. One of the kind of perks of driving in sim racing is you're able to not have to deal with sponsors as much, not have to deal with the restrictions of wrapping a real life race car. You can have some special designs that we see the very bright white, sky blue, yellow, and pink of the Olympus Esports Mercedes, as well as the bright orange of that Flying Hellfish Mercedes, which I must admit probably one of the nicest looking cars on the grid.
Yeah, no lack of eye candy out there in the field, being a lot of very creative designers hard at work getting these cars to look so good for these races.
Absolutely. We take a look also at the team. So Tig Gang Racing, as mentioned before, locking out that P1 and 2 as they have done multiple times this season. Denak leading Randomby this time, the opposite of last week, where Randomby is able to sneak their first pole of the season. Followed by Chloe, who is a independent with their Team Olympus Esports, followed by the independent of Lulu, the pad sweat, as they must say. But then we see the first of the RK9 Aston Martins in Zar, who has been able to put that car up in P5, followed back by the Flying Hellfish of Snowy, able to take that P6 position. We're going to jump back to Geeg with the RRP, who is, I'm unfortunately not too familiar who that is exactly, and Jasper filling out the P8 position, end of row 4 in that bluey McLaren. Slowbird following up in P9 with the very outdated Jag, but old but gold, as they must say. Slowbird has been loving that car from day one, and have to honestly respect the hustle, as they have put in some tremendous efforts. The second bluey McLaren filling out row 5, and followed up by Firebrand and Fane in P11 and 12. Pablo in the trailing McLaren in P13. going to be lining up beside Hubble in that P14 position. JPEG, the first of the Porsches, as we've seen, just trying to squeeze it out. Going to be a tricky race for them as they try to run up from P15 in what seems to be quite a tricky car to get right on this track. Followed up by the second BMW, Jinful, with that neon green, very hard to miss. Going to be keeping an eye on them as they had a strong race at Zandvoort. Could be looking to run through the field in the chaos. ZZ down in P17, that bright gold and black Porsche lining up next to Neo in that galaxy painted BMW, one of the nicer looking cars once you're able to get up close to it. Followed up by Ruby Kitsune and then KMA Quinn following up in the back of the field with that carbon fiber Porsche just filling out. And then, of course, our safety car Spitzer. Thank you very much for all that you've been doing to help us with this racing season. Just following up the tail end of the field, making sure everyone's nice and safe. If we have an early incident, they'll be there for that rapid response. But the race is soon to be starting as we see the drivers finishing their tire prep and getting ready to line up side by side. As you'd be a fan next to the stands here, you'd imagine the roar of V8s, 6s, i6s, and so on just trembling through your body. You have plenty of real life experience. Take us through that real quick, Josie.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible hearing all of these cars. Lots of different noises that these things make, differing, like you said, from the V8 flat plane, V8 cross plane. As they double up coming into the final corner, exciting stuff here. Cannot wait to see what the action looks like going into turn 1. I'll let you take it away.
Yes, as we see the orange and black leading the field as we slowly roll up, building to 70 kilometers an hour. The drivers are going to be ticking around the final bend, and their eyes are now going to be locked on those lights as we roll to the line. Lights holding a bright red glow, and we are green. The driver's foot to the floor as we run into turn 1. Looks like maybe a weak start for Denak. Randomly going to be trying to hold the momentum on the outside as we roll into paddock hill for the first time. It looks like Lulu able to take that P3 position, holding the inside of Druids, looking to make another position up as we roll through. All the drivers able to keep it clean here is randomly falling back another position. The Olympus Esports Mercedes able to get up one more position. Snowy able to sneak a P5 as well. Some of the drivers further back down the grid. ZZ getting up to P12, making it through the chaos of the first lap. And Hubble just able to peek a couple positions out as well. Looks like maybe an incident for Firebrand. Is the number 16 Ferrari stranded in the dirt. Looks like damage already on the front of that. Oh, just a clumsy little tap and a slow, lazy spin coming in from that bright blue Ferrari machine as we have to jump back over to the front of the field. And it looks like Lulu from that P4 position already moved up into second place, trying to push that charge onto Denak with those nice tires, those nice fresh tires. Well, the Ferrari tries to get them up to tempo.
Yeah, as like you said, getting up to temp, very important. These drivers probably running low pressures to make sure their tires don't overheat throughout the length of this race. So they are still heating those tires up, and they're still getting up to pace. So the drivers are being a little bit cautious off the start, but not too cautious, as we've seen a couple of drivers make some big moves on some corners, and also some big losses as well.
Absolutely, as we see the fastest lap tumbling down the field, as many of the drivers are getting the fastest run onto the straight. But we could see Fane already moving to the inside of Pablo. This is for P10, but no, deciding to back out. Pablo taking that wide and safe line, just trying to make sure that space is left. This is our closest group on the field. The cork in the bottle right now in Jasper, just trying to get those tires to work for them. But we see Fane hauling as a little bit of grass just picked up by the number 90, sorry, not the 96, the number 3, just trying to make it through. Oh, I think we had a big off in the background there from Neo, and I believe that might have been Hubble as well. Take a quick look back at that as we run into Surtees there. Looks like maybe, oh, maybe not Neo will catch the tail end of that. Jinful, yeah, and Hubble, I believe that was getting pushed a little bit wide by the KMA driver, but able to keep it going. Both these drivers able to succeeding as we see the 3 BMWs line astern, just trying to push up. Maybe a little bit of teamwork, maybe a little bit of infighting coming in from P14 to 16.
Yeah, yes, and like we saw just a second ago, oh, there's another off right there for Pablo. Just trying to rejoin the track in a safe manner. Let's see what happens. He comes down into Dingle Dell and on his way back up into. Oh, it's after Dingle. That's after Shin Curve. That is going into Sterling's. He's just looks like he's lost another braking and gone straight on. Hopefully, not too much damage on that flare as he rolls into the pit lane now.
Yeah, so that's outside of the pit window, so that's not going to satisfy the minimum pit requirement. Must have been quite a heavy hit as we saw them take up a little bit of grass coming into the braking zone. Really not the best for trying to get the car slowed down. The grass doesn't have as much grip as the asphalt. It's going to be a very, very costly mistake from Pablo, but hopefully they're going to be able to get that car back on track and rolling through the order.
Yeah, absolutely. Hope to see them back out on track and back in the action real soon. As we have a couple car links between these two drivers right here, coming around this fast right-hander coming over into Westfield. Looks like they're staying pretty even coming up the hill as Snowy is just doing his best to hit his marks. He's went off the track a little bit there. That's going to be costly coming into Sterling's as the driver directly behind him, that is Czar, as gets a great run coming out of that corner. He's going to go take a look out the outside. Looks like he fakes it a little bit and he drops back into the inside, and it looks like he might have a decent run on the straightaway. They are almost nose to tail coming into turn one. See if he has maybe a little bit of a peak coming up the hill into Druids. Good racing right here. Good racing. Just quick, little mistakes happen, and how you recover from them is a big deal, especially on this track.
Absolutely, and it looks like Czar really trying to push that pressure onto Snowy. Snowy able to keep that German Mercedes machine ahead of this Aston Martin, just trying to push ahead for the start of the race. But we mentioned it in qualifying that this is going to be a battle seemingly of the Mercedes versus the Aston Martins. It seems like they started to sort themselves out a little bit as Lulu and Chloe with their own little battle, followed up by Snowy, Czar, and Geek now here fighting for P5. The groups are starting to kind of file out a little bit, but pressure is mounting for Snowy as we see a little bit wide. That Mercedes may be struggling with corner entry. Looks like when it has the grip, it keeps it quite well, and they're able to pull away from Czar, but it's very, very peaky, so Czar is able to kind of hang in there by keeping it consistent. Snowy's using all of the track just to try to get any more to come of face as they can to get away from this Aston Martin.
Yeah, the Aston Martin, a very confident driving car from what I've experienced, and the Mercedes-Benz maybe being a little bit more unstable to be as quick as it needs to be. Now these drivers this is a race of attrition with a track like this. Not too many drivers taking too many risks this early on besides the start of the race, as drivers are just trying to turn laps, it seems, and not try to turn up the wick too much to keep it together for the end of the race. This is a very hard track to gain time back on once you have made a mistake, so very important. Speaking of, Czar a little bit wide on the exit of that corner there. It looks like they're still keeping it pretty close though, coming up the hill. Very important run off this corner for the straightaway. Let's see if you can gain anything on that Mercedes as they come down the hill to Pilgrim's Drop and back up to Hawthorns. See them coming into this right-hander right here. And just trying to keep it tight up against there. Mercedes looking a little bit wide off there.
And it looks like maybe that Mercedes might be running a little bit less wings, starting to pull away from the Aston through the straightaways. Possibly that might be the reason for those little wide moments, the tires just screaming for a little bit of help, just trying to get whatever they can coming out of the corner. Czar keeping firmly planted on the rear view mirror of that Mercedes-Benz. But what we're also seeing as firmly planted is this battle for P2, as Randomy has recovered and is starting to put the pressure onto Chloe, who is in turn has also got that pressure on Lulu. One thing to note too, Lulu being on the controller is going to be struggling with that front tire wear a little bit. We've seen drivers be successful with it, like Grim Lily and also Seffi as well, who have been able to have success with the pad, but it is very important to keep those front tires alive, as you can very easily cook the tires. And in track conditions like this, 42 degrees Celsius track, it's going to be extremely important to just keep those front tires alive on a track here like Brands Hatch.
Yes, absolutely. As hot as the temperatures are here today, you definitely want to keep your tire wear under control and try not to scrub those tires too much and generate too much heat diving down the hill here. This is a pretty intense battle, it actually looks like, with Chloe wanting to make up that other position as they race down the hill. Coming back up into, coming up towards Sterling. This is always a good spot to watch them battle right here. Usually drivers get a good run off of here and can make a move coming into Clark Curve. Oh, there's a little bit of a mistake there from Lulu. Chloe looks around the outside. Lulu gets the better of them on braking. They are nose to tail going down on the straightaway, side by side now. This could be very interesting coming into turn 1. Paddock Hill, not known as a corner you can take 2 lines through. We'll see what happens. Chloe backs out and gets right back on the rear bumper as they come up the hill towards Druids. Let's see what happens here. Any moves being made? Nope, just playing it very patiently. This is giving Randomy a chance to catch back up to the 2nd and 3rd place cars here. Very intense battle here going on for 2nd.
Yeah, absolutely, but all the time that this is going on, Denak just pulling away the gap already to 4.5 seconds, as Denak is saying thank you for the birthday present, as they have just trotted off into the distance. But that Mercedes-Benz just pushing the Aston Martin down the hill into Hawthorns as we tuck back up. Lulu maybe with a little bit more front end as we saw them roll away from that Mercedes-Benz, but that Mercedes is an absolute monster in the corner every single time we see it tuck up and just eating the curbs. This is certainly going to be a matter of time before Chloe is able to get a run to just be able to sling it past Lulu. We've run one more time into Sterling's, where this battle originated at. Just maybe a little bit of a gap starting to open back up as Lulu's able to string together a few good corners. Maybe just take a little breather. But as we run through the final corner one more time, it's going to be looking in that rearview mirror, check that gap after, and we have to head into Paddock Hill one more time. And then tuck it back down a little bit wide from the Mercedes drivers. And now you got to look behind because it's the rear view mirror being filled by that Ferrari. Randomly just trying to make note of anything going on, try to steal a position. Looks like Chloe able to get a little bit of a gap. Looks like Randomly could also be biding their time, just keeping it nice and smooth as we roll through here. Another battle going on as we have the Jaguar coming through. And we have Geek going wide. The Jaguar able to pressure Geek into a mistake. The 007 Aston Martin going very wide into the grass, but now falling into the clutches of Jasper, who might be able to take a big chance on the loss of momentum from Geek. Geek all the grass filling those tires and just struggling as we see another driver going wide, avoiding action. But now Jasper around the outside in the run up to Hawthorns. The McLaren has the grip right now as that tires are still very dirty on the 007 Aston Martin. You can see running all the ways wide, and now to the inside goes Jasper through the GP loop. And they try to hold it in. Geek just able to hold it tight. And down through the compression, Jasper's able to nose ahead and take it through Dingle Dell, line astern, and Geek surrendering 2 positions stemming from that simple mistake. We also see Chloe now also on another side-by-side taking the inside through Paddock Hill. Must have been a weak exit as we come back through, but a little wide, so we could see a shot fired back by Lulu. Trying to tuck it up to the rear end, but no, Chloe's able to get it in front and now try to run away. You know you have the pace. Randomy's going to be trying to look to get past as soon as possible.
Yes, this is a very intense battle. It's heated up even more over the past lap or so. Must have been a mistake on the entry to the straightaway to Long Brabham Straight. There was a little bit of a mistake there from Chloe. That's going to allow the Aston Martin to get right back on the rear bumper. Will they take a look to the inside, or will they just be patient with it? They're going to be patient, and they're going to wait and see what happens coming into this corner here. Mercedes running a little bit wide. This is very good news for Randomy, who wants to eagerly take away these 2 positions as soon as something happens. but clearly just biding their time back there as, like I said, a very attrition-filled race. You do not want to make any mistakes this early on and get too involved.
Absolutely, and the 73 is just biding their time. I think accepted that without a mistake. Denak is too far gone at 7.5 or 7.2 seconds already. But just needing to make the most of your race as you have it right now. And this battle continues to rage on for P2. As it looks like Lulu's starting to get back in the rhythm a little bit more, starting to claw that gap back to Chloe. But also, Enemy just starting to get a little bit more feisty, taking a small little look to the inside there, trying to make Lulu conscious of them. If they can pull them away from Chloe a little bit, get that draft away from them, they can start trying to make a move that might play into their hands. This is going to be a very hard-fought battle for Enemy just to try to get past that Aston Martin. Very strong car on the straights, and it seems to have the traction out of every single corner to just get away just enough so that Ferrari can't reach it.
Yeah, this Ferrari looking very good in the corners though. In mid-corner and corner entry and all that, it looks very good for the Ferrari as they're able to stay right on the tail of the Aston Martin all the way around the track, just keeping the pressure on them, not making any significant moves here and there unless we see a mistake. Oh, they've gone up the inside actually. As I've said that, they backed out as Sheen Curve is not a place for two cars to go too wide into. And they are back to being behind the Aston Martin as things have cooled off just a little bit. It looks like drivers need a little bit of space to kind of calm the nerves after that very intense 2 or so laps between the 3 of these cars.
Absolutely, but that could also be exactly what Randomie needed, pulling Lulu back almost a second away from Chloe. Could just be just enough that Ferrari driver needs to try to get a gap, pull enough slipstream away, but we can see Lulu hard under the brakes, very, very strong, in fact, gaining into Druids. Also, we see Geek now putting the pressure back on Jasper. We saw them come in earlier with that mistake, lose that position to Jasper while they still were cleaning up their tires. But it looks like those tires are finally clean now, got the grip back into them, and the pressure is mounting as we roll into Druids once more. Just trying to get the traction on that downhill. That Bluey McLaren up front has a very tall order in front of them to try to keep this 007 behind. We roll down to Surtees once more, but it looks like the McLaren able to keep the pace going just a little bit more. But while we have this gap in the action, take a quick look at our stewards report, see what has and has not rolled in from the stewards, and just try to give everyone an idea of who's been penalized and not for what. So as we roll through, we have a 5-second penalty coming in from Fane, a 15 coming in for JPEG, as well as a 18, a 5 for coming in for Firebrand. We'll get the reasons for those in just a moment, as it appears the stewards are just typing up the reasoning for that right now.
And Geek had gotten around Jasper just then and had lost it immediately in about the next corner. They are going to go side by side down Brabham Straight now. Let's see if Geek can maybe make a move. No, he's going to back out a little bit, it looks like. He's taking another look up the inside. Nope, he's going to... Oh, a little mistake from Jasper. A little wiggle coming into the corner is going to allow Geek to get right up the inside, coming up the hill into Druids. It looks like Geek will actually have that position now.
Yeah,
the McLaren getting right back up there, though.
Yeah, it's Jasper having to concede that position as Geek pulling a nice little over-under, just trying to get through. But Jasper, looking at that top-end speed of the McLaren, just immediately able to get underneath the rear wing of that Aston Martin, just carry that speed. But the Aston a little bit stronger in the mid-corner. Is McLaren really needing this back straight right now to try to stretch his legs, but maybe a little bit too much speed lost through Surtees for A&A be able to pull that gap away just a little bit more. But The gap closing up right now is Fane against ZZ. ZZ with that Porsche starting to really get to grips with it, as we saw the Porsche struggling in qualifying, but ZZ absolutely climbing up the field in the race. We saw them start, I believe, back in P17 all the way up into P11 right now, pressuring for P10, getting a little bit closer to the rear wing through Dingledale. Is a little bit wide as Fane's just trying to use everything that British machine has to just try to keep that number 18 behind. And this is going to be a very tall order for Fane to keep this, especially that 5-second penalty to come through this pit cycle.
Yes, absolutely. If they want to hang on to P10, they will have to stay ahead of that Porsche and anyone else behind them by at least 5 or so seconds. That penalty going to be very detrimental, especially towards the end of that race.
Looks like maybe an off-track. Yellow flags are flying down in Surtees right now. Turn 4. Looks like Ruby might have had an incident coming through. And oh, it's a tap coming around. I believe that was randomly. That's the pink wing end plates on that Ferrari. Yes, that's exactly who it was on the 43 of Ruby Kitsune. The stewards are going to have a very close look at that, and I'm sure they're not going to be very happy with what they just saw.
Yeah, a little bit of a checkup from the McLaren, it looked like, with the Ferrari getting into the back of them. Very common place to see mistakes there, as drivers sometimes get away from that inside apex and have to slow down a little bit more than the driver behind thinks they have to. So yes, very costly there. The Porsche catching right back up, ZZ catching right back up to the rear wing of that Aston Martin coming up the hill as they stay tight to the inside. Maybe a little bit too much curve from the Aston Martin. Mistakes will be very costly right now, especially for them, as ZZ's looking to the outside. Is this going to be an attempt? They get pushed out to the grass. They have to back out. They come to the straightaway here, the front stretch. ZZ having to back off a car length or so because of that. He will probably be very eager to catch back up to that car.
Yeah, I'm sure there was also quite a few choice words just said under the helmet. There is ZZ is going for the choice move on the mistake that Fane just had, and up the inside of Druids, the preferred line. The Porsche just needing the traction out, and that it will have. The Porsche just pulling down in the Graham Hill, now in the lead, as we're going to be seeing Jasper now chasing down Geeg. Once again, these cars so evenly matched, but gaining their time in such different ways. It looks like these two are going to be inseparable for the course of this race. Currently, that 007 Aston Martin leading the 223 McLaren, but it rolls a little bit wide. But is Jasper able to get a nose ahead? No. The pit lane is now open. Next 20 minutes, you can put the car in the pits and you will count. Just a reminder, you need 1 liter of fuel and a tire change.
Whoa, big off. Big off.
Big off for 223 of Jasper, just going a little bit wide as we roll through. Oh, what was going on there? It looks like, oh, just a little bit of grass on the ride along here. Jasper losing out just a little bit of grip and gonna be kicking themselves for that for sure by the time that we roll through here. It looks like it is going to be end of one of our closest battles on track. Jumping back on board here, we have Lulu. Actually, Chloe has gotten past Lulu. That must have happened while we were looking away, but Lulu putting on the pressure of Chloe to try to get that position back immediately.
Yes, it must have happened when we were looking away for sure. The Randomie has also dropped back a good distance off of these two cars. Not entirely sure what has happened there, but this battle heating right back up again. These two are just inseparable.
Yeah, and that 45 is just looking to try to get the momentum on the Mercedes, maybe just able to cool those front tires a little bit more while they're underneath them, get that pace back. But that Aston Martin is looking mighty strong right now as we have now entered the second third of this race. And pit window is open, so we could see a strategic move coming in here as one of these drivers might pit early for track position. Brands Hatch, a track where track position extremely important, as Chloe's a little bit wide. Is Lulu able to get the inside? Yes, Lulu able to dive in. Chloe with the loss of momentum, unable to hang on and having to concede the position once again as we have these two drivers are going back and forth the ebb and flow of the tires and how these cars gain their time, is now once again the Mercedes driver is going to have to find a way past that 45.
Yes, very costly move there coming into the Paddock Hill bend. Definitely a place you don't want to have any loss of momentum, as the Mercedes is right on the back bumper of that Aston Martin, practically pushing them down the straightaway. They're going to wisely stay out of that, pushing the Aston Martin, putting a lot of pressure on that driver.
As we see in the foreground, there is our camera shot. There's also some lap traffic coming in here, so that could play into the hands of Chloe as we roll through. And this 45 is going to have to make quick work of these slower traffic cars. The car goes offline, staying out there. They say for rejoin, that's not going to be an issue, but oh, I believe that was an incident for the 310 trying to rejoin the track. Yeah, quite a bit of damage. I believe they might have just lost it on the rejoin there. That's going to be a significant repair for the mechanics once they bring that back to the garage.
Well, fortunately for them, I believe that will also count as a pit stop for them. So not a horrible amount of time lost, but yes, repairs are still costly.
Absolutely. So you see Chloe now just trying to get that pressure mounting back. It looks like the Mercedes with a little bit of a wiggle coming through, just struggling to do anything meaningful here, but it's just keeping that mid-corner speed is the most you can ask for right now. And at this point in the race, it's just about losing the least amount of time. We're starting to enter that strategic point where it's just putting in the best hot laps you can and letting these drivers cooling off from the battles. Just trying to make do the best we can, but randomly also in the background there, as we saw, just creep into our shot. Not exactly out of this race, as they are creeping forward every single lap, 3/10 even in that second sector alone to this battle up ahead.
Oh yes, they will be in the picture before too long, and especially if they get a good run through pit lane. If they get into pit lane and get to their stall correctly and everything goes smoothly, you could easily see this battle come alive as soon as pit cycles are over.
Absolutely, and so this is going to be very, very tight between these two. And randomly now, the gap just falling. You can see it visibly just getting a little bit closer as they've now crept that down to 1.9 seconds. The randomly putting the pace on 6/10 faster than these cars in P2 and 3. So randomly is on a charge right now. In fact, matching the fastest car on track this most recent lap. We roll through, believe, a car returning to the pits, that's SaberKitsune, but Chloe's certainly got to be looking in the mirror here, feeling this pressure if they have noticed randomly in the rearview mirror, because that is a car on a charge right now.
Yes, that car is looking very strong. As we have said before, the Ferrari is very strong at this circuit, and if they can get those, if they can get the car underneath them in just the right way, those cars are very hooked up in the corners.
Absolutely, and we talked about earlier as well, Ferrari very, very strong on tire management. So this is the phase of the race where we're going to see the Ferrari really extending out the best it can. Is Chloe and Lulu are going to be shredding those front tires just a little bit more weight on the front end of that car. Just pushing those tires a little bit harder into the ground, just burning it up just a tiny bit more. But that's getting very, very tight. But actually, on the topic of randomly has dropped 2 seconds and is now under pressure from Czar. So perhaps a little bit of a mistake through the GP loop there, as now Czar is putting heavy pressure onto the back of that 73 Ferrari.
Yeah, no idea what happened back there, but that has cost them a lot of time. Czar eager to catch back up to that Ferrari after some of the battling we saw earlier. Coming up through Druids, they're going to take it tight up the inside. They're going to come down the hill to Graham Hill Bend. Ferrari still looking very composed, not entirely sure what happened back there to cost them all of that time, but once again, very costly, going to possibly give that position to Czar if he is not careful.
Well, I do believe earlier, as we saw on the back straight here, that there was a back marker that Lulu and Chloe had to pass. So perhaps maybe an incident with lap traffic, as I don't see that Ferrari anywhere in the mix. Yeah, that's a McLaren that just rolls on by. So perhaps a little bit of a tangle with the lap traffic here playing a part in this race. This could be really, really big as we head into the second half of this race. 3 minutes to go, so 2 laps from the halfway point of the race. Honestly, quite a few stories to tell, but our stewards have now come back in with our incident report as we have calmed down a little bit. We're gonna roll around with randomly here. Cars 64 and 16, they had a contact earlier in the race that was marked as an NFA by our stewards, but a 5-second penalty for, I believe, car number 3. So a penalty for the number 3 for that, then an NFA for the 2 and the 529, but then jumping into our big time penalty, the 15 seconds time penalty, that goes to car 12 for a rear end collision on lap 1, as well as our final lap 1 incident is an NFA for car 15 and number 2 contact between those. We missed, I believe, a large majority of those, but for the car number 2 and 16, it looks like, yeah, the number 16, one of the cars that have yet to pit, served that penalty, another 5-second penalty on the race for them for missing their marker, hitting the number 2 has appeared. So that's our stewards report as things have come in so far, and one of our drivers, I believe, already serving that penalty. I believe that was the number 12. That's going to spice up the race for a few of these drivers randomly. One of the drivers that has fallen foul to those incidents.
Yeah, absolutely, and that 5-second penalty going to be more costly than some other than some other drivers. As we see, Lulu is in the pits off of second position. They're going to make sure to hit their marks in the pit lane and get onto the track as quickly as possible to maintain that. But yes, randomly picking up that 5-second time penalty is going to be very costly to them if they want to stay in the top 3.
And we see the second Aston Martin Azar following in Lulu. So we have P2 and 4 now both pitting. That's going to be really, really big for the implications of this race. And I believe Chloe had pit in the previous lap as well, as they're down the order. So I can only imagine that they just took that Mercedes in for a fresh pair of boots. And it's now going to be the time where everyone starts to blink. The tires are starting to go off, and it's going to be a matter of who can get that track position first. But as we roll through here, it's going to be a matter of where does Lulu come out, as Lulu is certainly rolling in the pit lane already, but are they going to be far enough ahead? Chloe going to be slinging it around, and it looks like a big gain from the number 21 on those fresh pairs of tires. They are able to jump over. Actually, hold up. No, they have overtaken Lulu. Our timing screen is just playing a little bit of tricks on us, but the 21 has now moved up into second, or effective second position once again on track. Just trying to stretch those tires to the end now, about the halfway point of the race, so that should be no problem for the number 21.
Yeah, and that's like I said, it could be very costly in the pit lane. If any mistake happens, you miss your pit box a little bit, you don't get the car cut off quick enough for the pit crew to work on it. It can be very costly on track, and we have seen that, and especially those cold tires giving up a little bit more as well, especially compared to a driver that has just pitted. Their tires will already be up to temperature by that.
Absolutely. So we're going to see Chloe gain probably a little bit more on Lulu. It's actually that gap opened up to 5 seconds. So you'd have to imagine a little bit of a mistake coming in from Lulu in that pit cycle. Maybe not an obvious one, but just missing your box by a few meters and having to get dragged back, or like you mentioned, not turning the car off fast enough. Both are things in ACC that can delay your pit time and extend that stationary time. And that can be massive and come to the end of this race. But another driver that we haven't talked about much, Denak, who's been dominating this race, has now run well past the halfway point of this race and is still yet to pit, and is one of the last drivers to not pit. Oh, and of course, as I say it, they roll into the pits now, 28 minutes to go. Going to have one of the freshest tires on the grid as they try to roll around here. And this is now, the last driver of our lead group that has come in for their pit stop.
Yes, very little pressure for Danak as he has run up front this entire race in that clean air. Means he can just conserve his tires all they need to. And very important for a hot day like this, as we see Jasper coming into Paddock Hill. Danak has plenty of time to get back out onto the racetrack and stay in front of second place. So no real pressure there. It will really just be wherever second place comes out and the car Lulu behind them. So
Also, Gyro, I mentioned with the late pit stop with Slowbird. Ooh, a little bit wide goes Slowbird as we roll back in, getting chased down by the McLaren. But they actually jumped Jasper in the pit lane and have moved up into that P7 position, just trying to make the best use of this outdated machinery. But age is no factor for Slowbird, who has now stepped into P7, able to jump in front of both Geek and Jasper, who had been battling for a lot of that early stint that we saw at early stage of the race.
yeah, and that wears your tires out real quick, having to battle like that. We see a driver has been given a drive-through penalty. I believe that is Jin may have served with that drive-through penalty, it appears. Yeah, it's tire conservation being the story of the day, especially on a track as hot as this one.
Absolutely, as we see Wolf and Foxtail pulling out of the way of Randomy as they're getting put a lap down by the P6 driver. But they're also now trying to chase down Hubble while being under pressure from Jinfolf. So this is for P13 overall. Once Wolfen catches straight back to the rear end of that BMW. They're actually in a BMW sandwich right now as we watch Jinfolf go a little bit wide. A little bit of an incident for them. It looked like maybe just a little bit too late on the brakes, but they're going to drop a good bit of time down. The rest of the group is possibly no timing strength playing tricks. Again, looked like we had a driver falling down the order. But Fane having a quiet race down in P12 there, trying to chase down the Porsche Azizi 17 seconds ahead, but rather quiet race for the number 3. With how things have been going so far, I think that might be one of the better things that you could be asking for.
Yeah, absolutely. With all of the size of this track and the amount of cars we have on this racetrack, lap traffic plays into it quite often. So having a quiet race is something you definitely want in terms of you know, just not worrying about mistakes, not worrying about drivers in front of you or behind you, just turning laps, hitting your mark, and not making mistakes, most importantly.
Yeah, absolutely. As we see Neo now putting pressure on Pablo, the BMW that we saw earlier with a lot of damage on the front end, now fully fixed up and repaired, just trying to chase down the number 64 McLaren, just trying to squeak on by. This is going to be a big challenge for the BMW, not exactly known for its straight line speed, so it's going to have to be done in the corners. And around here, there's not many corners to do so. So Neo with a very, very big challenge ahead of them. But ahead of them is Geek, Jasper, and Slowbird in a 3-driver pairing or group trying to fight over that P7 position. While we did see Slowbird take advantage of their battle in the pits, it looks like they might not have the pace right now in that Jag to try to keep things going, as Jasper's now just starting to put the pressure on Slowbird and try to return that position back to the Bluey garage.
Yes, that Jaguar looking strong, but the cars behind looking stronger as they are losing a little bit of pace to that McLaren, looking quite settled in those corners right there. I'm sure the Jaguar having quite a hard time with some of these longer corners, being having a little bit less downforce, and as you can see, they got a little bit of a bad run. They're going to stay to the outside line. We're going to see a pass here. Doesn't look like it yet. They might get a better run on the straightaway, and Slowbird looks like coming up to the top of the track, trying to stay in that draft. Very good battle going on here for position. Going down into Paddock Hill. Time always gets made up. At Paddock Hill, very good runs are crucial to get up into Druids and get a pass made. Looks like the Jaguar maybe just a little bit stronger on the straightaways, maybe a little bit stronger in acceleration, but that McLaren quickly making up that time.
Yeah, absolutely. And just in one final note for the current penalties that we saw applied, 5-second time penalty was for the 73. That was Ranami, who we saw come in contact with Kitsune, so they actually did pick up a 5-second penalty for that incident we saw earlier in the race. Additionally, the 96 Jinful, who we saw get that drive-through penalty, was for speeding in pit lane. So very clumsy incident, the one I am very well known for doing as well. We see the inside taken by Jasper, who is very snuggly taking the inside through Dingledell there. And that's a move that we've seen they've been no stranger to, in full commitment coming in from the Bluey McLaren, as now the pressure comes from Geeg as Slowbird has fallen back, but that gap has come down to nothing as that Jaguar driver has got to be staring right through that rear hatch, just trying make sure that Geek doesn't get anything going, but the Jaguar trying to put another move on as the McLaren takes to the inside. Maybe looking for an over-unders. Can the Jag get the power down? And we could be seeing another side-by-side as Slowbird dives to the inside, stays a little bit out of there. As Jasper, almost contact coming from the two, but Geek's able to get around the outside. As we move to the inside of Graham Hill, the Jag falls 2 positions in 1 lap, but spin! It's there. Contact and Jasper, I think, having a moment that taking Geek with them. Slowbird getting the position back. What's a quick replay here as we dive in? Geek trying to follow through, and Jasper, yes, a big slide, maybe picking up grass and contact made. That's going to be damage for the 007 and the 223. The 007 now getting back in front, but the biggest benefactor of that, Slowbird, now pulling away by almost 3 seconds ahead, and Geeg with another big off. There's got to be lasting damage on that car.
Yeah, he's definitely has to have damage on that Aston Martin right there. There's a huge amount of understeer. It looks like he's really fighting that car. Other cars behind looking a little bit cautious of that Aston Martin. But yes, going back to it, the mistakes are very costly. Just a little bit of grass, a little bit of getting loose, a little slip and slide here and there, and you've messed up your day. You've messed up the other drivers behind you. Racing happens, and accidents happen, and I'm surprised he wouldn't be going into pit for that damage as soon as possible. It's costing him an awful lot of time in that Aston Martin.
Maybe just electing to try to deal with it. 20 minutes left, so only a third of this race to go. Perhaps thinking that there's not enough time to make up the time for the damage. Perhaps if it was at the start of the race, we might have seen them tuck in to try to get that time back. But not only are you trying to gain the time back for your time stationary and repairing that damage, you also have to take the time back from that entire pit lane trip. We've seen drivers that's losing about half a lap as, the Ferrari in the back with a big save from Firebrand back there, able to keep that Ferrari going as we saw them almost at a 45-degree angle just trying to catch that thing. But perhaps back to the Aston Martin, you have to make up a lot of time to try to get that damage back, and 20 minutes left, I'm not quite sure it's worth it.
Yeah. Going through pit lane, it is very costly going through pit lane. It is a lot of time lost, but sometimes you lose more time as you make more mistakes because of your damage. Sometimes your damage will cause you to make mistakes, as the car will either be more oversteery or more understeery through these long corners. I guess it's really just up to driver's discretion.
Absolutely, you got to make that decision on the fly, and that's what many of these drivers are having to do, as they aren't getting any support from any engineers or anything like that, like you'd get with a professional racing group. These drivers have to make these decisions on the fly and with the data available to them. For the most part, that's really just your tire temperatures, the balance of the car, and what your lap times are. And you need to just make that decision, a very quick decision, sometimes very little time, as we see Wolfen putting the pressure onto Hubble, who's had a little bit of moment on the inside of the corner. The McLaren trying to stretch his legs against the BMW and coming into Hawthorne's. Is that McLaren able to pull beside? Hubble leaving the inside there, but Wolfen unable to get the overlap. And it's going to be one more lap that Bluey McLaren has to wait. This is for P12 right now, and Hubble able to keep that BMW ahead through the GP loop. Wolfen picking up maybe a little bit of dirty air, a lot of understeer in that McLaren. They try to run through the back section of the track, but this McLaren really stretching its legs on the straight, able to pull itself back, and there we go, the compression pulling that McLaren back in as this gap is visibly closing corner by corner, and this could just be a matter of time until Hubble concedes it. But a very good run out of the corner from Hubble. Wolven unable to match just the ebb and flow. This is exactly why we love GT racing, as you see these cars pull away from each other and come back together through different sections of the track. You couldn't have this anywhere else. No other spec series will have it, where you're going to gain several tenths in one corner and lose in another. So these drivers have a very large puzzle to try to work out and to try to battle against each other.
Yes, balance of performance plays a huge part in that. You have many different makes and models out on this field, and that's what keeps GT racing exciting, is these completely different cars racing against each other. As you can see, you have your large coupes and large sedans and such racing against these supercars like this McLaren here. Big differences between these cars, different power plants, different weight values, lots of different things going on between these cars. It's always exciting to watch, see cars gain and lose going into corners, coming out of corners, on straightaways, and all of that fun stuff. As we see the battle heating up again between Jasper and Geeg. Geeg electing to go around the outside. Jasper looks like might have let Geeg by. Maybe there's a little bit more damage on that McLaren than we initially thought.
I'd have to imagine the McLaren, quite famous for being a sensitive car to any damage. If they felt they didn't have the pace, they might just want to follow through here. But also looking ahead down the road, they're only 3.5 seconds to Slowbird. So maybe a gap that they think they can get back coming through here. As we see, I think Jinfol's going a little bit wide there. As it's going to be a little bit of grass. Oh, an incident coming beforehand. I think they're just staying out of the way. Yeah, well decided by Jinfol to just stay out, not pick anyone else up in their incident. So kudos to them, as that takes a lot of patience to give up that much time. Jumping back up as we see Jasper now pushing Geeg. Maybe Jasper thinking this wasn't the right decision to let them by, and this gap has stayed extremely tight. Perhaps they don't think that Geeg doesn't have the pace, so this could get very, very spicy very soon if Geeg doesn't expect a pass or a move to be thrown by Jasper. And Jasper full commits to a dive here. As we see, a big moment from Snowy, collecting as well. Fane, they rejoin the track. I'm not quite sure what happened there. We're going to take a quick look. Already on the inside of the track, maybe avoiding an incident, and the loss of traction.
He's gone wide. He's gone wide and overcorrected.
Oh, that's a big incident. I don't think there's going to be major damage, but it looks like Randomy is able to get the position back from that incident. Yeah, it doesn't look like much damage on a visual inspection, just the left-hand side of that Mercedes. Oh, maybe the back end's got a little bit of something too. I have to imagine that started way earlier, because they were on the inside of the corner. They're already in the grass on the inside of Dingledale before that even started.
Yeah, very easy to go wide on that corner. Carry just a little too much speed, hit that inside curve just a little bit wrong, and you end up in the grass on the opposite side of the track, and it's all up to you to try to save that car, and a little correction here and there can be very costly. A little overcorrection here and there, I must say. That puts Randomy back up into 5th place after having to serve that 5-second penalty. So they caught the silver lining of that incident there. Very helpful for Randomy to get back into this race, at least into the top 5. I cannot see on my timing board is a little bit away from me right now, but I can't see how far away they are from Czar. Maybe they have.
Oh, big moment! Big moment!
Oh, big moment! Yeah, they are very wide coming off of that corner, and like we said, you just catch that corner a little bit wrong, and especially with a mid-engine car like the Ferrari, it can be very costly.
Driving on board here, I mean, oh my, full lock for that Ferrari, just trying to catch it. It's going to certainly be a heart and mouth moment for Randomy, just trying to get that car collected. My, oh my, yeah, that Ferrari just bit back for a car that's looked so planted all race. That is a very big shot coming in for the Tig Gang racing driver.
Yeah, very scary moment right there, and very fortunate they didn't get into the wall on either side of the racetrack or into any other competitor on the track. But I guess maybe that was a little case of the commentator's curse there, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. Randomy might not be too happy coming back through here. Snowy actually picking up a 5-second penalty. I'd have to imagine without looking at it that that's for the contact on their incident with Fanish Zima, that blue and her pink Arcane 9 Aston Martin that they ran into. I have to imagine Serenity might be able to inherit this position back. Worth noting, you don't have to pit if you pick up a penalty. It is just a post-race penalty if you decide not to serve it of the equivalent amount of time. But 1.9 seconds, that's gonna be a big gap. 3 seconds and 13 minutes. That's gonna be a massive challenge for the Mercedes driver. But we can see them using all the track as they're just trying to pull away that gap randomly. One of the fastest cars on the track right now, certainly trying to prove that they can get back to the rear end of that Mercedes.
Yeah, definitely wanted to get back in the top 5 after that near accident that they had coming off the top of the hill there, as they are trying to chase down Snowy and try to take advantage of that 5-second penalty that they now have. Top 5 finish would not be a bad run for them considering some of the incidents that have happened throughout this race, but also in the grand scheme of things, coming from a second place start must hurt a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, remember that they did fall to 4th position right off the start, getting caught on that outside line. Lulu and also Chloe are able to sneak through, so it may be not the worst result as once you consider where they fell to after lap 1, but certainly something that they wouldn't be happy with. We saw yellow flags pop up for Jasper. Ooh, maybe a little bit of an incident coming in for the Bluey McLaren. I'll have to take another look and see if we can grab a taste of what happened to the 223. I'll take one more look at this. Not quite sure as we run up to Dingledell and... Oh, just a little bit too much grass, yeah.
Just caught that little bit of grass on the outside of the corner, and like we were saying, that corner is difficult, especially in some of these cars that maybe get a little bit tight or a little bit loose at the top of the hill. You know, you're coming up over that hill and you got a little bit of as we see another incident there. Yep, same story, just a little bit tight coming into the corner and you just go a little bit wide, and that seems to be the story for Sheen Curve quite often.
Yeah, it's just, oh my, it's a very tricky one to imagine. Dingledell has now caught out quite a few of our drivers, but we saw, I mean, in this AmChamp, it seems to be some of the corners everyone just decides to pick is the corner to struggle at. I mean, we saw Nigans and Beckett's at Silverstone. The entry of that corner was catching out quite a few drivers, sending them around, as we saw almost half the grid felt like had at some point taken a spin at Maggots and Beckett's, and looks like Dingledell, it's that corner this week has decided to make all the incidents come alive. It's actually the second big moment that Snowy's had through that corner in, I believe, what, 2-3 laps, as we also jump back down the grid. Hubble is to let Wolfen by, but it looks like now they're starting to pick up the pace and is getting right on the rear of that McLaren, maybe just needing a little bit of a lead and chase to help get them on pace and comfortable with the car. But Hubble's starting to put that pressure back on that Bluey McLaren, who's only recently gotten past.
And we are getting into the closing stages of this race. Coming up on 10 minutes left to go. Drivers will be trying to close gaps and trying to jockey for position if there is any to be gained. Some cars very spread out on track right now. They will just be trying to keep it together to maintain their positions. But for some other drivers, the pressure will be on. One driver not feeling that pressure, I would say, at the moment is Danak, with a very large lead over second place Chloe, leading a very strong race right now. Now coming down into Sterling's to complete another lap as they come up on a little bit of lap traffic in front of them.
Danak leading by 18 seconds is another dominant showing by the Tig Gang Racing driver, and just catching up. I believe putting Neo another lap down here in a few laps time, but we're looking at probably about 6 laps if I had to reckon off the top of my head until we're going to get that white flag, maybe 7 depending when Danak comes around the line. As we see that Gang Racing number 54, it just looks absolutely planted and not a single thing that can go wrong. But certainly this has been This has been the race for Denak to really assert why they've been the champion and why they have deserved what they have achieved this season. And it's just been another race, another story on a track that we've already seen has been quite chaotic for many drivers. They've been very quiet, keep the head down, keep the foot planted, and just bring it home.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, race of attrition early on. Race of attrition. Your mistakes will be very costly on this racetrack. Very early on, it gets very crowded, and as the race goes on, you just got to hit your marks. You got to keep from making mistakes. And Denak's done very good so far to show that both of those things ring very true. You know, extending that lead out to such a distance over the rest of the field. As we see Jasper off again in a very unusual place. Looks like they just were in the grass and kind of just stayed in the grass. Not entirely sure what was going on there. Maybe some sort of hardware error or malfunction of some sort. Maybe.
I do see a bit of damage on the front splitter of that car, so perhaps they went off and maybe a little bit wide through Surtees, caught that outside wall and just didn't want to rejoin in the traffic. But I do think something has happened to damage that McLaren further from what we saw on that spin earlier at Graham Hill Bend. And that's just causing a little bit more issues than Jasper would like coming through here.
Yeah. Some repercussion of deciding not to go into pit for what could be some damage on that McLaren. But as we said, pitting this late in the race would be very costly to the driver. So definitely takes a little more skill, a little bit more effort to keep that car in check on the racetrack, especially around other vehicles.
Yeah, absolutely. It's certainly going to require you to be a little bit more patient, especially with front-end damage on a car like the McLaren. It doesn't want to rotate, so you need to be way, way more patient to try to let that car work around that damage. Otherwise, you're just going to be over-slipping those front tires, and in ACC, you have the graining effect that you see in real life, where you start shredding the surface of the tires, ripping little pieces of the rubber off of the tire, and it sticks immediately back to the surface, and that causes a loss of grip and can start further complicating the issues and causing tremendous amounts of understeer if that becomes too bad. And I mean, while there is a phase that you can get the tire to work through that, with 6 minutes to go, I mean, I think that's going to be near race ending if you have any battles coming through. It's just going to be a case of just survive.
Yeah, absolutely. Just surviving is name of the game with damage on your car. And if you are wearing your front tires significantly more than the rest of the cars on track, you're just trying to keep it on the road. As we see Snowy coming through Clark Curve onto Brabham Straight. Being relatively close to that Ferrari up there, but still having that 5-second time penalty. So to get into 5th place, something significant would have to happen, some mistake of some kind.
Ooh, there might have been a little mistake as soon as you said it, as it looks like the gap to Randomie has already closed up significantly for that Mercedes, but I think it's going to require a big moment for Randomie, but we've seen it can already happen, or we've already seen it can happen, as Randomie had that very, very big moment coming through Dingledale, that snap oversteer that almost caught them out and sent them around. Snowy just needs to hold on here and just keep themselves close, because anything can happen in racing. We saw it in race 1, final lap, final sector even. Denak was stripped of a win for getting a drive-through penalty. And we also saw their nearest competitor, Chloe, also pick up a 5-second penalty just beforehand, which actually gave the win to Astro, and also put, I believe it was Czar and JPEG on the podium. But all these drivers, just keep your foot in it, because anything can happen at any moment, and it looks like Chloe's coming in to the pit. Speaking of anything can happen, I didn't see a penalty come up for them, so perhaps underfield a little bit. This could be another position for Snowy right now.
Yeah, this is very important. Track, lots of track to be gained right there, especially lots of position to be gained as well. That's very important, because that puts them right up into 5th place once again, and that will put a large enough gap behind them to where they can actually keep 5th place. Chloe looking like a very unscheduled stop, like you said, maybe underestimated how much fuel would be used during this race, But very unfortunate right there for that Mercedes-Benz.
Yeah, and perhaps that had to do with all that battling that we saw there. I mean, you talk about an endurance racing, you can save a bunch of fuel in battling or in trying to get past lap traffic, but in this single class racing, you're going to have to be burning up that fuel. You're going to be lowering down to a lower apex speed. You have to build that momentum back up. So perhaps that caused the Mercedes to burn a little bit more fuel. It is quite a thirsty car with a 6.3 liter V8 underneath the hood there. That could have been what cost his drivers looking like maybe about 2 more laps to go, but that's going to be a very big mistake that certainly they're not going to be too happy with.
It looks like the battle's heating up here between Geek and Slowbird. Now, like I said, with 3 minutes left to go, drivers are going to be turning up the wick and trying to make up as much position as possible as the McLaren moves over to the side for these two cars to battle, going down into Pilgrim Drop and toward Hawthorns. Let's see if Geek can close up the gap to Slowbird. Looks like he will a little bit, maybe a little bit of a push. He's keeping about the same distance off of his rear bumper as they come down the hill through Dingle Dell and up towards Sheen Curves. We've seen a lot of problems. We've seen a lot of drivers make mistakes here. Just got to keep it nice and tidy through here. There's only a little bit of time left. Mistakes right now would be very costly, more costly than normal. So drivers having to be on top of their game for these last couple laps or so.
Absolutely, but we see that gap just closing up, so the eye of the hunter is right now with Geek as they're just swallowing up all the time, but we see that Jaguar every single time we pull onto the straight, just pulling time, and it's very deep for Geek. That's the mistake we were just talking about that you needed to avoid, because you only have 2 laps left to make it or break it, as that 007 now needs to pull just a little bit closer, as Slowbird just needing to keep the Jag in front, use that straight line advantage to pull away, but a little bit of wheel hop coming in from the P7 driver. That's going to bring Geek right back in, but too far back for a dive. Geek needs to file back in line and just use the traction of that modern machinery. But then here we go back to the straight, and we watch Slowbird just prance away with the straight line advantage of that Jag. But here we come back into the GP loop, and this is where the Aston Martin's just been chewing time away from that Jaguar, and I'm not quite sure how much longer Slowbird's going to be able to hold on to this gap, because it just looks like Aston Martin has so much more tires. I think that's gonna come down to the final lap here.
Yeah, it's going to be a very exciting final lap. Looks like don't know exactly where Danak is on track, but it is definitely coming down to the final lap or so. Looks like, yep, there it is, right across the line. This will be the final lap for Danak. And it'll be the final lap for these two as well to sort this out, to see if Geek can get in front of Slowbird. We are going to have to see if Slowbird can hang on to it. Geek going a little bit wide there, trying to get as much momentum as possible. Trying to close that gap, trying to push every last bit that car has in it to catch up to this G3 Jaguar.
Yeah, just trying to leave it all out on track. We saw Geek moves all of that track and just try to really use even the sand for traction, as this could be the run that Geek needs. But the Jaguar once again stretching its legs as it runs like a cheetah down to Hawthorns, just pulling a little bit away, and this is going to have to be a very audacious move from Geek, as maybe a little bit too much curb, pushing them back, and all Slowbird needs to do is keep it together now. And ooh, could be a little bit of understeer coming through, but it looks like Geek could just be too little too late, but Dingledell, they close it back up. And coming through Sterling's, this is where the final run is really gonna matter. It's going to be Geek trying to make the final run. Denak coming back down to try to make the run to the line. Geek just needs to settle it up, and this could be a run to the line, but no, Slowbird able to put the power down. It's going to be P7 for Slowbird, P8 for Geek, and a great battle between the British machines trying to put on a show at their home race.
Yeah, sure Slowbird is very happy for that result. 7th place, very strong for that Jaguar. As we see cars now coming across the line, the race is over. The checkered has been thrown. So any last efforts from any other drivers on track? Looks like they're all pretty spread out otherwise. But very good racing between that Aston Martin and that Jaguar. Drivers flashing their lights in celebration as they cross the finish line of this 1-hour AM Championship race.
Absolutely, and quite the race it's been. Chaos and controversy everywhere to be seen, as we saw quite a few incidents, but also quite a few great battles. Snowy coming home with that 5th place position. Are they going to keep that? I believe so. Chloe quite a bit behind. Oh no. Perhaps finishing needing more fuel once again, but just needing to sputter across the lineup. Don't believe they'll drop this position here, but Snowy will keep that P5. So it's going to be the end of the race once Chloe is pit in here. Yes, just filling into their garage slot. Visible wall preventing them, but we'll imagine that they made it in. But yes, it's going to be P5 for, or no, P5 for Snowy. I believe just with disconnects, we saw Snowy move up the order there. But quite a good effort from the 555 machine, and one that Snowy will definitely be happy with. But once again, asserting their dominance, it's going to be Denak throwing a little bit of donuts down inside of turn 1, and what an event it has been for them. It's been 4 race wins, and every race that they haven't won, they've been on the podium. So if Verstappen-esque domination or Vettel-esque domination, whoever you want to cheer for, but certainly a championship that Denak has deserved, proven that they're in the class of the field coming through here. Lulu, P2 on debut, as well as Zar with another podium to add to their name in the AM Championship. But what a race that was. Certainly one that I can't forget.
Yeah, burning down the house there. Denek had to return immediately to the pit lane. I'm sure those tires were completely worn out, especially after those incredible laps that he had put in throughout the length of that race. Very impressive finishes from pretty much every driver on track. We saw greatness from them all, and a lot of strife as well, especially coming through Sheen Curve. That was the story of the day, was that corner throwing some drivers for a loop, it seemed, and some massive mistakes coming out of that. But lots of positions gained, lots of positions lost, some frustrating results, some drivers absolutely elated to be where they are.
Yeah, and a couple of the pirouettes coming together as they see the RK9 drivers burning it down together, finishing out their season strong, and quite an event it has been between the two of them. But for one final time for the AM Championship, thank you all for coming out to an exciting race. Congratulations to Denak and Tig Gang Racing for their victories, as well as if you would like to join us, please jump down to our Twitter and Discord. Links are down in the description and below. We have been Simufur. Thank you all for coming out, and have a good night.